Hi, welcome to the award-winning Ed Brown Show. Once again, outstanding guests. We have one guest here, he's like the bugs that we just had in the studio, and he's always around, but that Foreign Service officer here, and he's going to bring the subject matter about the migrants and about Iran and stuff like that, So, just hold tight. And then the surprise is going to be a young lady from Prince George County, doctor. She's going to talk about self-care strategy. And, well, then we'll move on. But right now, we're going to get Michael. Michael, welcome to the Ed Brown Show.
Well, it's good to see you.
Well, there's so many topics out there, international, national, but the one that we're going to center around, Iran. Everyone feels, especially a certain party, that it's a no good. We don't need it. It's not going to work, and as soon as we turn our back, it's going to backfire. Tell us about it.
Mr. Brown, there's a huge history to this, and that history is dominated by a long story of animosity between the United States and Iran, a fear on the part of some of the Wahhabi Arab states that a reconciliation between the United States and Iran might mean that their relationship with the United States would be eclipsed. Israel feels the same way for different reasons. The Republicans on Capitol Hill are no fans of President Barack Obama's foreign policy. Many of them took an oath when he was elected not to make his job any easier. So with those factors on the table, we have presented to the public a partial analysis of what was at stake when the administration began negotiating with Iran, negotiating together with its 5 partners plus one, and where we come out is, for example, when a state develops nuclear weapons, the chemical of choice for those weapons is not uranium, it's plutonium. Mm-hmm. One of the cardinal issues in this treaty is that the Iranians have forsworn the use of plutonium. Now, if the Iranians are not using plutonium, then the chances of them developing an efficient nuclear weapon
are not good.
Right. That is a little known fact, but it is a factor in this treaty. That gives you some sense of how much candor is being shared with the public. The Iranians initiated these discussions on improving relations after, at the end of the Bush administration, the beginning of the Obama administration, because President-elect Obama said that he would be amenable to negotiations with the Iranians on bettering relations. Now, as things moved forward, the Congress decided that in tandem with his initiatives, they would initiate a plan for sanctions, so that the Iranians would know that there was a downside were they not to agree to some of the P5 plus 1
Yeah, but a
proposals.
lot of people, that's what turned a lot of people off, is that word sanction. What does it mean, and how long is it going to be effective?
Well, probably the most famous sanction is the restriction on petroleum imports into Iran, and that in and of itself is a can of worms.
Right.
I mean, perhaps a better metaphor is
especially when you have Russia.
baseball.
especially when you have Russia looking over and supplying them with the things that they need. How do you stop that?
Well, initially, Russia was a more pliable partner and was cooperating with the U.S. Now, not so much.
Right.
But nevertheless, we have an agreement. The United States, despite some faltering steps on the part of their Russian partner, the United States and the other European allies, partners, have come to an agreement. But there was a time when Russia was supposed to cooperate with
Exactly.
Iran. The U.S. and Russia made a proposal to the Iranians, but the Iranians had just gone through an election in 2009. They behaved badly during those elections. Many people were killed in the streets because the story is that those elections were stolen from Ahmadinejad's opponent, and Ahmadinejad was reelected. That really froze the attitudes of many of Iran's Western negotiating partners. So, as you can see, there are a lot of inside stories here, but the bottom line is that when it got down to really serious negotiating, the efforts of the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his visit here and his address to Congress did not sway the results of those negotiations.
That's what I was thinking. How would Israel expect to get anything positive out of negotiation when they actually came here and embarrassed the president by meeting with Congress?
Had he succeeded, he would have embarrassed the president. The fact that he failed probably resulted in an embarrassment for Netanyahu himself. That's right. That would be my response.
And you're saying he failed because of the fact that they came up with an agreement and they were able to get it through Congress.
They came up with an agreement, but at that time, I don't want to confuse the timeline. When he came here, it was fairly clear that the Republican House was not going to agree.
Sure. That was easy to determine.
Right. He left, and there was a lot of arguing back and forth, but his presentation lacked specifics. In other words,
when you say he, who are you referring to?
Netanyahu.
Okay.
Netanyahu's presentation seemed to lack specifics, and in that it was sufficiently weak, and therefore did not really persuade too many people. People who were already predisposed to opposing President Obama, of course, thought it was wonderful.
Well, the Secretary of State, how much influence did he have on that?
He had considerable influence. As a matter of fact, I don't know whose idea it was, but I suspect that it had to the inclusion of the Secretary of Energy in the negotiating team was very helpful, and I would suspect that the Secretary of State had his imprimatur on that decision.
So it was very crucial as far as coming up with some agreement. Now, a lot of people don't understand, how long and this is going to last, and they're very skeptical due to the fact they say, well, this agreement or the sanctions be 10 years, then after 10 years or after 15 years, then the Iran go back to what they were doing.
Well, that may well be, but the way technology is evolving these days, in 10 or 15 years, we should have the monitoring technology to determine whether the Iranians are escaping from the treaty. The treaty, I think, is no worse than any other treaties that we've had, and probably considerably better. And the fact that the Iranians find it helpful to agree, even though they're forswearing the use of plutonium, tells me that someone negotiated well on the U.S. side.
Okay, well, as far as those two, plutonium and is concerned, are the Russians involved? Are they limited to not supplying them with this plutonium that they need?
I don't see how the Russians can get through and sell them plutonium when it's proscribed by the treaty. I mean, that would be...
Well, the treaty is really is with the EU and the United States. It's not with Russia.
The Russians are participating in this.
They are?
Oh yes. Oh yes. The Russians are
well,
participating in this.
A lot of people misinterpret that. They thought that Russia wasn't involved. It was the EU and the United States treaty, and that the Russians could decide one way or the other based on the way that things were going in the world, whether they wanted to supply them just like they do in Syria now, right?
Well, yeah. Well, Syria and Iran are two different cases. Yes, Russia is a wild card in Syria,
right?
And we're negotiating with them now. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the partners are Britain, France, Germany, Russia, the United States, and one other state. I'm blocking on the other state, but no, the Russians are involved. The Russians are probably the second major military power on earth. You really can't have a meaningful arms control agreement without them.
Okay, then you mentioned major power. What about the Chinese now? They resent the fact that they are not being considered a major power as far as arms and things like that. But what they're doing economically, they're taking over the world.
Well, that was true up until about a month ago, and we don't really understand the intricacies of the Chinese economy, at least I certainly don't. But we know that there are certain structural weaknesses that are being reflected in the Chinese stock market these days.
Yeah, what is the ICU, the International Bank? The Chinese have terrific influence on that.
I don't know that. No, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
But I do know that people who have invested in China's stock market, especially people living in China, the Chinese themselves, have lost heavily, and they're really wondering what has happened, whether any restitution can be brought to them, and if not, what recourse they have. For them, it's a serious situation.
Right, right, because the banking world, they seem to have working with the Chinese as far as the economy is concerned.
Right.
Because the power that the Chinese had developed in the economic world is really outstanding.
Well, and I think you're probably going to see repercussions in the economies of East Asia, South Korea, Japan, and a few others, probably Malaysia as well.
Yeah, because the influence of China
absolutely
is involved. Well, as far as Iran, what do you think the Chinese think of this deal? Of this, they're sitting back. They have made no statements one way or the other. They're just going about the economic enterprises.
There are probably 2 or 3 serious metrics of power in my view. One is whether you wield political power beyond your borders. Second is whether you wield military
power, right.
And the third is whether you wield economic power beyond your borders.
Okay, with that, we want to wrap this up. But I want to thank you for being here. And hopefully, you know, the way the world's going, we're going to always have a topic, you know, because with the sanctions and everything that's going on, then you got to really, when you say sanction, you got to define it.
Exactly.
Okay, this has been Ed Brown. Hey, we'll be back with the doctor. You know, she's self-care and from Prince George's County. Hold on. See you in a second. Hey, welcome back. And we have a young lady here from Prince George's County. She's a physician, and she's talking about care, essence of strength. You know what I mean? You're talking about healing and things of that nature. She's been on before, and she's fantastic. That's Dr. Janie Sineski. Did I get it right, Sineski?
You're getting so close, Mr. Brown. It's Jatu Sineski.
Hey, tell me what you've been doing since you left. I know you've been quite busy and everything. You have this program that's coming up in October. Tell us a little bit about it.
So as part of my business, Essence of Strength, I do what I call self-care advocacy and coaching. So I do individual coaching, but I also do small group coaching, and once a month I do something that I call Self-Care Saturday. The clients that I work with most often actually are women in medicine, but I work with all manner of altruistic overachievers, people who have gotten a lot of degrees and certifications in order to be able to help people at the highest level possible. But often those same people have never learned how to properly care for themselves. So with individual and with group coaching, I help them implement strategies that support their personal and professional achievement. So I just had a Self-Care Saturday workshop this past weekend. And
you did?
Yes.
Where was it?
It's in North Bethesda.
No.
And a lounge in North Bethesda. Just have a small group. We come in, we do an assessment of current state of well-being versus desired state of well-being, and come up with actual practical things that can be put into place in order to go from your current state of well-being to your desired state of well-being.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background. A lot of people, they say, how can she do all of that? Just let them know. See, you missed it last time, so here it is again.
So, briefly, I am a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist. I practiced in Montgomery County and Frederick counties for 6 years when I came out of my residency training. I did my medical school and residency at Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta. I moved back here, I practiced for 6 years, and over the course of my time in private practice, I recognized that I was having difficulty designing a life that I really loved, where I could help people and also was able to maintain a sense of well-being at the same time. And so I decided at that time to leave medicine. And in the process of trying to figure out how I could still do work where I'm helping people, because that's something that's dear to my heart, is being able to help other people. In the process of doing that myself, I actually worked with a coach to get clear on, okay, how can I use these skills and these desires and these talents that I have in a way that's of service to other people? And I realized, having come from that background of being what I like to call overeducated and undersatisfied with my life, I could share the tools that I learned to build a life that I love with some of my fellow altruistic overachievers. So that's the short version. There's a whole lot of stuff in the middle, but that's the short version.
Well, tell us about this essence. How did you come up with this essence of health? I mean, give us the reason why you chose something like that.
So I started Essence of Strength because I recognized that a lot of times, especially those of us who have been in school for a really long time, we have spent our entire lives with other people giving us the benchmarks for what is important in our life. We go to school, we get syllabus, they tell us what you need to learn. You go through all the different steps in your life thinking that when you get to the end, your life is going to be exactly as you want it to be.
This is the alpha and omega.
And so that's plan A. And if plan A leads you to the life you want to have, you're golden. However, if perchance plan A does not lead you to a place where you're feeling satisfied and fulfilled with your life, many times we have not developed the skills through all those years of being in school to figure out a plan B. And many times we're so busy working in that plan A life that we don't make the space to develop a plan B.
Expense too involved in there. You know?
Absolutely.
During that time, you have to eat. You have to live.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, so what I thought would be useful is to help people develop the skills and implement the tools to help them develop a plan B. And for some people, plan B is, like myself, totally different than plan A. For many people, it's just slight adjustments in the lives that they're currently living that make it more enjoyable for them. But so many people are so busy and fatigued and just feel overwhelmed with dealing with their life. Being able to make the space in their life to figure out how to make it better is actually overwhelming for them.
Yes.
That's part of the reason I decided to do the Self-Care Saturdays, because even just taking that 2 hours out of your day, for many people, they tell me that's the first time they've really sat and thought about themselves, because people are in these healing professions where they're helping other people, thinking about other people. A lot of my clients are moms, so they're taking care of their kids, they're taking care of their families.
It's time.
And so when you think about all the things to whom you feel responsible, all of the people to whom you feel loyal, a lot of times you just keep falling lower and lower on that totem pole.
Well, that's planning, you know, and a lot of people, they have difficult doing the planning when they have a natural options, you know, before them. So what they usually do, they take the easy way out, say, well, I've done enough of that academic stuff, so I'm going to go out here and make some money. But what do? You analyze the individual to the point that you give them hope.
I'll say I'll spin that slightly. I help people kind of analyze themselves and help reflect on their lives and get clear on what their own personal priorities are. Because again, you've been living your life for so many years, living up to other people's priorities, that sometimes
well, you say other people's priority. So
many times you think that's your priority. And you haven't really sat back and thought, okay, what is actually important to me? I had a client once who, the very first meeting, she told me this is the first time in her life she spent that much time thinking about what she wants and what works for her. And many times it's because we perceive that as selfish and perceive that as not the right thing to do, especially when you have an altruistic nature and you're always thinking about helping other people. The thought of turning the mirror on yourself and figuring out what works best for you, you perceive as somehow taking away from other people. And what I try to help people see is that if you take care of yourself and if you are functioning at your highest capacity, you're actually better able to take care of all the people that you want to care for.
Well, how do you set up this, like this program that you're going to have in October there? How do you get individuals interested in? You know, that's pretty tough, you know, when a person, in your case, I would say, you know, you're a medical doctor, you know, you've achieved a lot of things, and then you look at a lot of things and you analyze those things and you say, I don't know, I think I can make a contribution a little more. I'm not satisfied with what I achieved. How do you get people thinking that when they already have a situation where they're making money, they're in a nice environment and everything, say, hey, why should I leave this environment? Yeah.
What I find, and that's why I always say that I work with overachievers. Some people find that off-putting. Was like, it's really the best example of the folks that I work with. You always are trying to do something. So a lot of times the people I work with have their physicians, their PhD researchers, they're doing a lot of things, but they have so many other things that they'd like to do also. And so
they don't have time.
Exactly. And so trying to figure out, okay, how can I fit into my life all these other projects? People want to write books, people want to start different programs, some people want to do a side business in addition to whatever their main thing is. So the very first thing that most people have to do is decide that they are worth the effort. and I make the distinction of deciding that it's worth the effort, because many times you have the knowledge, let's say for folks who want to lose weight and be more healthy.
Right. And
we know that, you know, if you eat better and you exercise, we have the knowledge, so we know theoretically it's worth it.
Right.
But it's figuring out, okay, what makes it worth it to me? So once people decide it's worth it to me to invest time, talent, and treasure into this, that's the very first step.
Right. And see what happened in myself. I'm analytical chemist, and actually I went into the scientific field, and then I found that communication is the thing I like better, and I went into the radio, television, and newspaper and things like that, which had nothing to do with my major in college. But those things, I think a person has to have somebody, you know, whisper in the ear or do something to do that, because in most cases like that, your people around you think about it, say, hey, look, you already got 9 degrees. Where are you going over there? That's a lot of problems. You know there's going to be problems in that second choice. How do you get people to accept it, people that are around you, you know?
So I would not so much say trying to get people to accept it as much as you accepting that they might not accept it, because I cannot make you do anything.
Right.
I can't be in control of you. All I can do is control my reaction to you.
You do it, huh?
So kind of going back to that slightly selfish thing is recognizing, getting people to be comfortable within themselves about the decisions that they made in their life, so that they're somewhat impervious to other people's opinions.
Because it's something like you're into the scientific field, and now you're in a different field.
Yes.
And other people, sometimes that's unusual. Usually when they achieve one thing, then they are satisfied themselves, satisfied in that environment. Now, in October, you're going to present. How do you get individuals to think that way? You know, because our society don't think that way. Once you reach your common goal, well, that's it. I'm a doctor, I'm a chemist, whatever. This is it. And then they have some things that they want to get involved in, but they're afraid to go out and do that because they're going to be criticized by their peers.
It's all about being honest with yourself. It's about seeing the reality of your situation. And if you are perfectly happy with whatever achievements that you have, like I said, Plan A worked for you, that's great. It's sometimes difficult to be honest with yourself about the fact that Plan A didn't work, or Plan A isn't working exactly as you'd like it to be. So I encourage people, just start out, be honest. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's scary, but it's about being honest and recognizing that it's worth it to put forth the effort to have the life that you love.
And some people are afraid to make that step, you know, because of the peers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The peers that originally were involved with, and all of a sudden, just like in your case, you're a medical doctor, you know, I mean, hey, look, you know, socially and financially, you know, you don't have to worry about that, those two things. So I'm glad to have you back. I'm telling you, this young lady here is a good example. She's from Prince George's County, and she's done a wonderful job. She's involved in this program now, and that's going to be in October, so you look out for that, because you can really get. I want to thank you for being here, Doctor.
Thank you so much for having me again, Mr. Brown.
See you again.
Thank you.
This has been Ed Brown. See you next time.